And
Of
I,
course.
I kind of disappeared, which I've always been so extroverted that I think people didn't know. And because I just kind of dropped off of things that it was like, what's happening with Julie? No one knew. I mean, there were times I was suicidal, there
Yeah.
were times I was very, very low. But I had great neighbors. My daughter got me. I mean, my daughter is my anchor. When I look in her eyes, I'm always like, okay, be someone that when she looks at you, she feels proud that you're her mom. You don't have to be perfect, but that she's proud to say you're her mom.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition, a podcast about making the most of the changes we're given. As a married father of 3 teenagers, a longtime global business executive and adventurer, I've been through hundreds of transitions in my life. Many have been difficult, but all have led to a depth and richness I could never have imagined. You'll get to hear all about them on this podcast so that together we can create more love and joy in our lives, no matter what transitions we are going through. Welcome back to Life in Transition. I'm super excited today to have a good friend of mine who has done some amazing work in her life, Julie Holland, who is working in I'll just say broadly, the mental health space, and is really expert, has been through a lot of transitions through her life, most recently supporting my friend Jim Phillips in immersion intensives. And we'll talk some more about that. But I'm really excited to have you here. I'm really supportive of the work that you guys are doing. I'm really excited about being a part of that and being on the advisory board there. And I would love to hear about, and we'll have some time to hear about how that was going as well, but hear about, like, what do you feel, Julie, is, coming to Life in Transition, where we're really helping people to make the most of the changes that life gives them, right? What would you consider to be, one of the biggest or the most important, or one of the transitions in your life that you learned the most from, that you would like to share with our guests?
I have a new puppy, so my puppy is joining in on our podcast.
That's
So
awesome. Can we see him? We saw him just a minute ago off before
sure,
we started. Oh, there
here
he
he
is.
is. This is
Uh, is that a
he's like,
French bulldog?
I want to talk too. So there you
Oh,
go.
that's
Say
awesome.
hi. He is a full 11 weeks old. And as you would know, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Art. I know when you and I first connected, I felt like we really did connect. And since then, I've become a huge fan of Life in Transition. And it's something that's so near and dear to my heart. The biggest transition, I think, for a while I said it was when I had a baby, when I turned 40, lived in a foreign country. But I later realized that was a piece of cake compared to having so much of your identity wrapped up in your job and in your career.
Mm.
And I went to work for a company in the 1990s, and it was my dream job. It was the job I had always aspired to have. It was a C-suite position. It included a lot of growth, and we went from one facility to 23 facilities in a very short period of time. Um,
Wow. That's a big
but
transition on its own
it,
right there.
it was. And, it was treating a field that I really had both personal and professional passion about. And I think, what happened is, the times during the years that we were growing and everything was exciting, I didn't see that so much as a transition. But when I realized that my job and my travel was really impacting my family, I made a decision to step down from my C-suite role. And I really didn't understand the impact that would have on me.
Mm.
So many
So
people,
what was that impact? Like, what you said you didn't understand the impact. What did you come to learn later?
well, that my identity was really caught up in that role and me being having a seat at the table within this company that I had tremendous respect for, being aligned. I mean, I was the first female executive to be part of the team. And I think that there was just so much of my core of who I thought I was, and actually who I was during that
Mhm.
time. I
Yeah.
felt like there was a lot of pride, both from my family, from my peers, from individuals. And I think what happened is I made the decision to step down, but it's kind of like when people go through a divorce and they think they can go through a divorce and still have the same life, as they did
Mhm.
before. And you really can't. I no longer had a seat at the table. People would turn to me for input, but I realized it was just a different journey than I had been on before and a different level of involvement. And right around the same time, I ended, my marriage ended suddenly, and my father passed away
Oh, wow. So you
suddenly.
had three big
So,
transitions all at
so
once.
I did. I'm so sorry. Come
Oh,
here,
it's
you.
okay.
Um, Come here.
Yeah, he can join us. It's no
He
problem.
wants to join in too.
He,
He
he
says
can
this
be
is a
part of it.
transition.
Yeah,
He
that's
said
right.
it's a
He's a
transition for
new,
him.
maybe smaller, but a new transition for you right now.
He is. He is. Thank you. So, I think what happened is I had three very tough things hit me all at once. And I think I remember thinking at first, oh, this would be great. I'll be able to spend time with my dad. But what happened, I remember being at the Denver airport and I was supposed to be getting on a plane and to go see my dad. And I couldn't do it. I had a full blown panic attack.
Oh, wow.
And I just could not even get on the plane. I sat there, I called my mom and I was crying, and here I had been this very successful businesswoman and I couldn't even get on a plane. Um,
Mm.
but I realized I remember sitting there. I remember exactly where I was sitting at the Denver airport. I was recently in Denver speaking at a conference, and I walked through this same concourse and walked by the exact same place. And I remember that feeling of just feeling stuck,
Mm.
feeling like I used to compare it to being in the twilight zone,
Right.
that I had no idea the impact of that decision on my life. And I realized I didn't really even know who I was anymore. It's like,
Yeah,
who
that's
am
what I was curious about because you said it's, like you didn't realize how much of your identity was tied up in your
I?
job. And then, shortly after that, you're having trouble even getting on a plane. So obviously you must have connected a lot of who you were
Right.
to your
I
job. And
did.
what, like, how long or what was the process that you went through to let go of that identity, to form a new identity, to realize who you were without the job? What did you process through? What were your feelings like? What was going on to, because I think this is something that is really meaningful for a lot of people listening to this podcast. A lot of people are going through this, but nobody wants to talk about it because it's embarrassing and you feel less than and so forth. But I think it's really could be really useful for a lot of people.
Right. Right. Well, I have many friends and colleagues who have gone through very similar. And there's really, unless someone has gone through it themselves, I think so many people look at you as, oh my gosh, you're this strong, powerful woman. What do you mean you couldn't even get on an airplane? Oh, you made a decision to step down. Why are you having such difficulty with this? And I know I also have a history of an eating disorder. I'm fully recovered, have been for many years. And during that time when I was active in my eating disorder, I was very externally validated. It was all about what other people thought of
Mm.
me. And what I realized is I had really just switched. And instead of having an eating disorder, my work had become my obsession. And what I did, I'm a very all or nothing person. And I realized that I didn't have moderation in my life.
Mm.
And so I really lost myself. And so my journey was going back and finding out who I was. And as simple as it sounds, I was able to take, because then, I had first made the decision to step down from one position, but then the company sold and I was let go 100%. So I also lost my job during this time.
Wow.
And so, but the good part of that was they were very supportive of me. They gave me, a good package, a severance package, and I was able to take time off to really work on myself, both in therapy with a really great therapist and I'll tell you, one of the things he said to me one time, and I'll never forget, he said, Julie, why do you always make things work that aren't supposed to work? And I said, because I can. I've always been able to. You know, if a relationship wasn't working out, I would find a way to make it work. You know, if
Right.
a job didn't seem to be right for me, I would find a way to make it work. You know, I always said my dad was a Ford car dealer, and I always said if you could sell Fords, you could sell anything. And so I think that
I won't tell my friend it's a CTO Ford that you said that, you know.
hey, I love Fords. My first car was a Mustang. But you know, at that time, you know, I love giving my dad a hard time. But the truth is, we both knew how to make things work that just weren't meant to work. And when I said that, I said because I've been able to. I remember he looked at me and he said, "So how's that working out for you, Julie?" Well, not so well.
Mm,
And
mm,
so, as simple as it sounds, what I did is I turned to the outdoors. I started getting, you know, I had a beautiful yard. I was living in Denver, Colorado. So you have great seasons when it's not snowing.
right, right.
I decided that spring, I kind of hibernated during that winter. And then I decided, no, Julie, pick yourself up. Um, you can do this. And I got outside and there was this huge oak tree with these roots that were, you know, just going everywhere. And I remember getting out there with a hoe that had like a sharp axe on the end of it
Hmm.
and just beating that. And afterwards, I would feel so great. And then I'd have these
Right.
beautiful flowers and all the
Doing some
bulbs.
anger therapy in the garden.
But just putting my feet in the ground and my
Mm,
hands in the dirt and allowing myself to cry and say, this is hard.
yeah.
I'm
And
sure my
nature is such a healer. I mean, it's such a connection to ourselves, to God. I mean, it's
is.
really a healer for sure.
It
It-
is. And I had lots of, speaking of God, I had lots of conversations with God during this time.
I am sure.
You
Can
know,
I
and
can I back up on a couple things that I wanted to ask a little bit more about? When you decided to step down from your job, because you acknowledged that afterward you sort of figured out how much your identity. How did you go through the process? Where did you come up with the courage, or did you feel like that you came to that yourself, or did life sort of smack you upside the head and make you? I'm curious how did because that's a big step, you know, being in a C-suite and super successful in a fast, high growth company in an area that you're really passionate about. So it's not like you were working assembling widgets on an assembly line. I mean, you were doing something that you really felt good about and was growing really fast, and you're in the C-suite, and then you step down. What was that decision process like? And was it, fear that you
yeah,
overcame, or what was that process like?
it feels like yesterday. I remember very well. I had been traveling because we had several locations. We would
And how
travel.
many years ago was this? Just so
Oh gosh.
roughly.
Okay, let me think because I can do it by how old my daughter is.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
my daughter was 10, so about 10, 12 years ago.
Okay. Okay.
And I had mentioned that, you know, I had gotten married and but I was traveling a lot. And during that time, my daughter, she was 10, 11 years old. She was probably 12. She was around 12.
Okay.
And she came in one night, woke me up early in the morning, and I had just been gone on a trip. And she said, Mama, my arms hurt. And I'm like, you know, baby, what's wrong? And she lifted up her arms and she had just these whelps just up under her arms. And, you
Like
know,
hives.
right, like they were worse than hives. They were like sores, you know,
Wow.
almost and blisters. And so I, of course, you know, as a mom, you don't want to freak your child out, but I'm kind of like, baby, when did you first start getting this? And she said, when you left. And I took her to the doctor, and they thought she had autoimmune disease. And then they found out it was just stress related. And I'm sitting in the boardroom and we're having a conversation. And something clicked in me. I heard this voice. Now, whether it was an actual voice or just the voice in my head, it's just not enough what you're doing, Julie. And truly, I don't
For
recall.
your daughter.
Well, for everything. I'm in this boardroom and I'm hearing about work and it's just not enough. It's just not enough. And truly, I don't recall my employer ever saying that to me. So as I
Okay.
thought about it later, it could have just been me thinking that. Maybe they were asking me questions like, what's going on with your digital? What's going on with inquiries? I mean, who knows? But in that moment, I thought, I can't do this anymore. And
Mm,
I won't do this anymore. I
mm,
tried 18 years to have my daughter. She's second cycle in vitro. I had her
mm,
when I was 40 years old.
mm,
And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm putting
mm,
everything in life ahead of her. And I thought about um, in therapy one time, talking about we live our life mirroring what's most important to us,
mhm.
and I
Right.
thought if someone,
Whether we
I,
want to admit it or
whether
not,
we want to
we
admit it or not,
actually are doing, we're mirroring, we're giving our energy to, we're spending our time with, our attention with whatever is
right,
most important to us. We are
right,
worshiping whatever God that is that we make the most important.
absolutely.
Wow, that's a big realization.
And, and I realized that I wanted the world to believe, my daughter to believe, I wanted to believe that it was my daughter.
Mm,
But I realized, no, it's
mm,
not. It's my job. And so I'll
mm.
never forget my manager, the CEO of our company, said, "Oh, Julie, you're probably just tired, emotional, whatever." And I didn't really like that, but
Yeah,
I said,
yeah.
"No, I really thought about this." And he said, "Come see me tomorrow. Sleep on it and come see me tomorrow."
So Julie, just to understand, in that meeting, when you had this thing about this is not enough, and you had this epiphany. I mean, it wasn't like a slow, gradual thing. It was like, bam, an epiphany that I'm worshiping my job.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think that my daughter's most important, but the fact is it's not. And you decided right then to quit. And you told your boss right after that meeting.
To step down.
Yeah, to step
Yeah,
down from
at
that
that time
C-suite
it was
role.
step
Yeah.
down. I
But
I
to
just
take a step back to start making other priorities in your life. So you made that decision in that meeting, and then you told your boss that day.
I he told me to sleep on it, but I came back the next day. I had not even told my husband,
Oh,
but
wow.
again, let me say, I think I didn't fully understand how tied up my own self-worth was in that job. And so in my mind, like I said, it's like going through a divorce. Oh, if I go through a divorce, I'll still see all the kids. I'll still see everything.
Right.
No,
Right.
Julie, your world is going to change.
Right.
And I remember I kept having this dream. It was constant that I had lost my wedding rings.
Mm,
I had this dream over and over and over, and I would wake up in a panic. Where are my rings? Where are my rings? I mean, my entire family became familiar with it and would say, Julie, you have them. They're right there.
right.
But I realized it had nothing. I mean, maybe it did, because then I did end up losing my marriage. But I realized it was really losing everything around me that I felt had grounded me, that had
Mm-hmm.
given me self worth, that had given me purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And when that realization hit me, I felt kind of ashamed of it. It was like, Julie, your job is what gives you purpose. And
And was that realization in during the epiphany you had in the boardroom, or did that come later?
it came in the yard while I was.
Okay, in the spring where you were hacking the oak tree roots to make a
I
garden.
mean, the truth is, Art, I went through a severe depression,
For sure.
severe.
For sure.
And I couldn't function. I didn't shower. I
Yeah.
cried all the time. During that time, I mentioned that, I ended up going through a divorce. I mean, it was totally unexpected. He just came in one day and said, I don't want to be married anymore. And
Wow. How long after that, like from when you had stepped down, how long after that was that he announced that
a
he wanted to
week,
leave?
it was the same time.
So you were still working, but you had stepped back from the C-suite role. So you had a smaller role and you were
Mhm.
feeling very depressed, realized that not only just working in general gave you your purpose, but having that prestigious position,
Mhm.
having the title and where you felt like you had a lot of power and authority and influence gave you
Right.
purpose, gave you your sense of identity. You stepped down from that. You're feeling
Mhm.
depressed, really low functioning. And then your
Mhm.
husband a week later says, I'm leaving.
Right.
Wow.
And could never really tell me why. And, I'm one who I'll ask, well, just tell me why, because I do want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I look at it now and I'm able to go back and answer why. But at the time my self-worth was really low.
Mm.
And but I'll tell you,
And that was because, again, all attached to the identity of the job. So if you're not the C-suite person, then you also, in your mind, somehow, I also don't really deserve to have a husband, or it doesn't, it's understandable if you'd leave or something like that.
Yeah. I was just so lost. I mean,
Mm.
I was
Mm.
really, really lost. And what was really significant to me, the one place that I always knew, other than my job, that I was really good at was being a mom.
Mm.
That is one thing I've always felt, that I was a good mom. But what I
Right.
realized is that during that time, that when you have so much attention, you don't have the same level of patience. You don't have that I may be sharper with my words, or,
Mm.
trying to make it all work and be there for dance and be there for this. And because I would never say no.
Right.
And but I realized the impact on my daughter, and I think that added to it. But when I turned around, it also had to do with my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we were on our way to a dance competition, and this was right before the spring. So, in Denver, it snows in June. So I don't really actually remember when it was. I just
It could
remember
have been the
it
actual start of summer,
It
sometime
could
June
have. It could
21st.
have
Yeah.
been. So honestly, I don't remember the exact times during this, but I do remember we were driving to a dance competition and something came up and I started crying. And my daughter looked over at me and she said, "Mama, what is wrong with you? You're crying again. You're not the mom. You're not, you don't seem like my mom anymore." And I remember at first I was kind of angry about it. And I'm like, I'm a therapist. And I'm
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
"Anna, the day I stop crying is the day that I stop feeling. And
Right.
so if this bothers you, I'm sorry, because if I keep it all in, I'm going to implode." But there was something that happened in the way that she looked at me, this child, this that was so innocent. And I realized I had always been her rock.
Mm-hmm.
And something about it just moved me into action.
Right.
Soon after
Right.
that's when I started working in the yard, and I
Right.
started, using that axe and praying a lot. I call it praying, but it wasn't praying. I had conversations.
Yeah.
I
But
had
that's the real praying, I think.
That's the real praying. People would say, "Do you pray?" I'm like, "Well, I have conversations,
Yeah.
and I did. And I stopped asking why. And I started just believing that there was a reason. I realized I had always said to my daughter, "Honey, you may not understand it right now, but things happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
God knew you before you were born,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore things happen for a reason. Sometimes when you're not willing to make the move to do something yourself, things happen because that's what's supposed to happen."
Right.
And
And even if
yeah,
there are some things that are, random, we can still make reason for them. We can still make meaning. We can still grow from them. We can become bitter, or we can grow, right? Or we can learn, right? Even
and
if it's
I love that what you just said. You can become bitter or you can grow. Because I realize, the road less traveled, that book has always really had an impact on me. And I realized, Julie, you're at a crossroads in your life. It's very symbolic. So you can choose to become old and bitter and angry, or you can choose, okay, I have an opportunity ahead of me. And what am I going to do to make the best of that? And I always say don't live with regrets. And my biggest regret during that time is really not making the best use of not working. And I had a severance, so I was being paid, and I had insurance, and it was a time. When I look back now, I feel this company gave me a gift. And I've said that many times. I don't have any hard feelings. I mean, I was hurt for a long time because
sure.
because what happened, people treated me differently. People looked at me differently. When
And
people,
if your self-worth is tied up in that, that's a problem. If you
yes,
know who you are without that, then that's not a problem. But at the
no,
point you were at then,
that's
that was a
absolutely.
problem. Yeah.
Mhm. And, because the truth is, people may not know the story, but people like to come up with a story,
Of course.
And
Of course.
I kind of disappeared, which I've always been so extroverted that I think people didn't know. And because I just kind of dropped off of things, that it was like, what's happening with Julie? No one knew. I mean, there were times I was suicidal, there
Yeah.
were times I was very, very low. But I had great neighbors. My daughter got me. I mean, my daughter is my anchor. When I look in her eyes, I'm always like, okay, be someone that when she looks at you, she feels proud that you're her mom. You don't have to be perfect, but that she's proud to say you're her mom.
So here's something interesting I want to pull out right here, because there's so many thoughts running through my head right now. But the fact is that what can pull us from our lowest space is serving a greater purpose, right? Viktor Frankl talked about that there's three sort of categories for purpose that you can have. One is to love somebody and care for somebody else completely, take care of somebody completely. The second one is to do something really significant professionally. That's really, cure cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the third one is to suffer with dignity. That if you have cancer, if you have a very tough disease or something, but you can suffer that in a way that is dignifying and it still gives you purpose. And so it's, people don't think about those too much today, but from listening to you, like you're a very, very low space. And that what actually pulled you out was like, I need to be the best person I can be for my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
That was, and you recognize that when you had the epiphany already in the boardroom, that your purpose you weren't actually curing cancer with your job. Your ego was hung up in it, and you had a lot of stuff in it, a lot of identity attached to it, but that actually wasn't your purpose. Your purpose was to give yourself to your daughter. And
Yes.
so you made that decision, and then you put yourself in that position to be able to do that. And then, of course, a lot of shit came up, and
Absolutely.
a lot of healing and stuff that comes with that. But then that was also as you said, your anchor. What pulled you out is to giving yourself that purpose of service to another human being, to someone that you love and give yourself to completely, which was your daughter.
That's so true. As you're talking, I have chill bumps, it's that accurate, just as you said that, what gives me purpose. I mean, there is so much truth in that. And I've always said, I can go back and I can look at eating disorder, the clients I worked with who now have children and families, and I feel very proud of that. I think, it took me so long to have a child, though, that I truly think what happened is that I put all of my purpose and gifts into taking care of other people and of helping them to heal and recover. And I think that's why, I was known for working with some of the most difficult clients, the therapy veterans, the ones who had gone in and out of programs and not done very well. And I mean, I had all types of clients, but I had patience with them that a lot of people didn't. And when I look back, I truly, as odd as it may sound, it was like I was putting all of that energy I had, all that purpose when I wasn't able to conceive and have a baby into my work.
Right.
And so then once I had my daughter, then it's like, okay, how do you transition? Talk about life in transition. How do you transition from being this workaholic and all in and tenacious and, to being mom?
Yeah, finding some balance there. And it sounds like too, and as I'm learning your story here, and we're all learning it together here, but that you had some real strong sense of purpose when you're dealing so much with clients, and which then transitioned a little bit how to do that to become a mom. But then your C-suite job was less about dealing with clients and more just on the business aspect, which is, knowing you a little bit that I do is less purposeful for you.
It is 100% less purposeful.
More ego attractive, more, more what you think you should be, but not living your purpose as much. So that's probably another thing when you stepped away from purpose, but got the high profile, and then having a daughter at the same time. And then, as you said, then there's a lot of transition that comes up. I had a question on the eating disorder. Did you get through that before your daughter, before this epiphany at work, or was that after that? Or
my own recovery?
Yeah, from the eating disorder.
Right. My eating disorder started when I was 6 years old. My dad went to Vietnam, And my mom's way of taking care of the family was to cook beautiful meals and to feed us. And my way of not dealing with my feelings was to eat. And so by the time my dad came back, I had tripled my weight.
Wow.
And I remember the first thing my dad he always hated when I told this story. And I'm like, no, Dad, it's really a beautiful story. But he comes off the plane, at that time it was before all the, aviation requirements. We were actually able to meet him out on the tarmac.
Right, right.
And so we went running out there, and I remember he tried to pick me up, and he's like, well, will you look at my little tank? And I remember thinking he thinks I'm a tank, but a tank in my dad's eyes was a good thing. I mean, this
Yeah.
man's been in Vietnam,
Yeah, he's a military guy. It's strong. It's safety,
military guy. Yeah. And I remember he was in the exchange club, and I remember I spoke to them one time and I shared the story, and after he was like, honey, I never knew that. And I'm like, Dad, you said it with love. It wasn't like you went, what a tank. You said
Right,
it with
right,
love in your eyes.
right.
But yeah, so my eating disorder started then. Always I had it all through high school. One summer I lost a lot of weight. I call it was my anorexic summer. I came
So
back to
still in
school.
your eating disorder, but you lost a lot of weight through anorexia.
Lost a
Okay.
lot of weight, in a
Okay.
very unhealthy way. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
stopped eating, and I was using laxatives,
All
and
right.
I would never let people see me eat. And then when after that, in order to maintain it, I just had very unhealthy eating habits. And but I got a lot of praise for losing
Because
all
you
the
lost the
weight,
weight. How much weight did you lose, Julie, during that time?
I went from 100, probably, I mean, I was 4'8" and 170 pounds in fourth grade. And so
Wow.
I was obese, and
Yeah.
military doctors put me on diet pills. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
it was so unhealthy. But then I got down as low as 90 pounds. And by that time I was 5'4". So as my
Jeez.
height, I'm growing and I should
Yeah.
be gaining weight. What happened with me is that's when I was losing weight. And a lot of my infertility issues are tied into that. That's what people don't
Right.
understand. My years of really abusing my body took a hit for many years after that, even though I was in full recovery. And for me, one of the reasons I always really believed in creating access to care was because I just knew I thought what I was doing was normal. I thought it's what people had to do to look a certain way.
Oh,
And
wow.
so until one day someone looked at me and asked me about my eating disorder, I was kind of like, wait, what are they talking about? And around that time is when Karen Carpenter died from her eating disorder. And so but that was another transition. I was working in a mental health center, and I was 18 years old, and started, I worked in, like, I'm actually kind of laughing because it is service. I mean, at 18 years old, I'm working, driving a van, taking PHP clients, to day treatment. And I loved it. I loved every single thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
And many of these clients would never be able to gain any recovery above what they were doing, but they were able to experience life in a different
Right.
way.
Right.
And I just thought that was so beautiful. And then eventually, I mean, I went through, seeing therapists.
What's PHP?
Oh, I'm sorry, partial hospitalization.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
Using
Thank
those
you.
acronyms,
Thank
but
you.
yeah, it's day treatment, partial
Yep. Yep.
hospitalization. And so,
Okay.
but at that time it was just for mental health clients. And I lived in Swainsboro, Georgia. And eventually, one day, I mean, many years later, I mean, I've been in therapy. I, never really made the connections about my need for external validation and to look a certain way, and how that was tied into relationships I had and not feeling good enough about myself. So therapy really helped me. But what I said is I went the long way to get therapy. And so I was really committed to creating programs that could help people, so people didn't have to go the long way like I did.
Right.
And so I
The
helped
long
to
way meaning you just took a long time to get there, and then you
a
did it
long time to get
slowly.
there. Right. And so I helped to create and open an eating disorder program in Savannah, Georgia.
Nice.
Became very involved in the International Eating Disorder Association, and 40 years later, here I am, but it's never changed. I mean, even though I've worked with intimacy disorders, I've worked with substance use, I've worked with trauma,
In your client base.
right.
Did
And
you, when on your own recoveries, did you ever use 12 step or not? Were you ever involved in 12 step?
interesting, when I was involved with 12 step was when I worked in 12 step.
Oh, okay.
Before
Okay.
we opened an eating disorder program, I worked in the addiction field, and I was a CAC3, and that was just the level at that time. And I would take them to meetings, and I learned a lot. I mean, I told people, the 12 step program, even though I wasn't in it for substance use, I started applying it to my life.
Sure. Yeah.
And I feel very strongly that that was one of the great influences
Mm.
for me getting to where I am today.
Yeah.
Uh, so I got it kind of vicariously,
Right. Right.
never walked up and got a chip, but I will tell you, there were times I wanted to, and I didn't even drink. So, I
Right.
did drink, but alcohol was just never my thing. So,
Right.
but it was life changing for me. So I am a big believer in the 12 step program. But, when I look back though, so much of what we're talking about now I think too, I always knew I would be a mom.
Hmm.
Anyone who knows me, I
Even though it took a long time coming, you never had lost that faith that at some point you
never,
would be a mom.
I knew I would be a mom. I didn't care if I had to adopt. Being a mom is in my soul.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
it's in my genetic makeup. I mean, I can't imagine living a life and not being a mom, though I have a lot of friends who have chosen not to be, or maybe they're a mom to their dog. I don't care what kind of
Right.
mom you are,
Right.
you're still a mom.
Right.
But I also have friends who don't want to be a mom, and I get it. I didn't at first. I'd say, okay, you have to help me understand this, because it's just so not in my DNA. But I get it, and
Right.
I understand it, and I honor it.
So
And
you
they would
so you made that you had this epiphany in the boardroom of like, I got to change some things. I need to be. I realize that my job, my prestige, my title is what I'm giving my most attention to. It's my sense of identity. It's what I'm worshiping, if you will. It's what I've made into my God. I need to be spending more time with my daughter and raising my daughter. So you made that decision very quickly,
I did.
and took action on it, which is something. I mean, you could say, well, it's not well planned out or whatever, but the fact is, you would have come to that decision at some point anyway, no matter how much you stressed over it, and you just made it quickly and did it. So I think there's a lot of kudos to you for that, for having the courage to say, I know this is right, and this is what I'm going to do, and we'll work it out later.
Right. I think it was always right below the surface. I think that whether it was in my conscious, thoughts, I believe it was always there. Is this right? Am I doing what's right? But I also know that I'm the kind of person, it's a clicking thing. When something's right, it's right. And
Right.
I know it. And I trust my gut with that. And but at the same time, believe me, there were plenty of times that I would wake up sobbing, crying, going, what in this world did I do?
What have I done? Yeah.
What have I done? And I seriously would think I needed to wake up from this bad dream, that
Mm-hmm.
my life had shifted so much that it was like a really bad dream that I didn't know how to get out of. And one thing during that time is I knew that I already had a job. I knew where I was going to work, and it was with another eating disorder program. The CEO was a very close friend and someone I have a lot of respect for. Ironically, after I went there 2 years later, the same thing happened. It was another transaction, and I had just moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and sold my house in Denver, and my daughter was going to be going to school at University of South Carolina. And I'm like, okay, I'm on the way. Life is good. This is my last job. And on Monday, I got a call that I was no longer, that they weren't keeping me, and that they were bringing all of their executive team to Minneapolis. And so again, it was one of those things of, oh my gosh. And what happened then is it wasn't just me, it was a team that I cared about, you
Mm,
know.
mm,
And so I realized for me, I knew how to get through that because I had been through it before.
right,
I knew how to manage that transition.
right, right,
But I saw what it was doing to other people around me who had never had this happen before. And that's what I was saying. Until people go through it, they can say, I'm really sorry and all, but I know that level of pain and I know being scared. And so I watched this team of amazing, well, I'm saying amazing women because they were all women,
right.
um, all of a sudden lost and in that same place I had been.
And what was it that you, from having been through it before, what, how could you help them? What uh, jewels of wisdom did you pass on to them? How was it that you were able to help them through that transition from what you had learned before?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mentioned this before that things happen for a reason, that
Mhm.
sometimes we can't understand it. But that every single time in my life and in my daughter's life, and in my friends' lives, um, my parents, I mean, I've seen this over and over and over that when people are asking why, that 6 months, a year, sometimes it takes even longer, but you're able to go, oh, yeah, that's why that happened. And, I think we grow up with this myth that life is supposed to be easy. And if
Mm,
it's not,
yeah.
we must have done something wrong.
Yeah. No, it's life is going to be life. And yeah.
Yeah.
And we can, as I said earlier, we can get bitter and resentful, or we can learn and grow.
Yeah.
And even if it's really hard. And normally looking back, and it's not that, I'll just speak for myself. It's not that I would choose the hard things necessarily that I've been through, though I make up hard things now from a physical adventure standpoint. But
Right.
it's not that I would choose the hard things that I went through, say, as a child and so forth. But I can still even now, I can blame that for why my life doesn't work, or I can do my healing, do the therapy, do the recovery, learn to listen to God today and use it to learn from and see if my suffering can be transmuted into gold for myself and then for others, right? And that's really what this podcast is about, right?
You,
It's
you
really
know what
trying.
I always say? There's this little voice in my head that says, he's not done with you yet, Julie.
Yeah.
you
How do
know,
you know? Because you're here.
not done. Right, right.
That's
There's
right.
still
No, that's
there's
right.
still lessons for you to learn. There's still lives for you to impact. And, I mean, that's what I love about, I mean, even like you were talking about me being at immersion intensives now. Um, Ironically, our first intensive was about trauma in the workplace. Well, been there, know it. I
Yeah,
know
you're
all
some of
about
an expert in that now,
it.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, to know that no, these weren't eating disorders, women with eating disorders. No, they weren't, substance use disorder. Yes, there's trauma, but it's different than what I've worked before. But to have a space that people could talk and feel it's okay. I can say I'm scared. I can say I messed up. I can say I don't know what's next. And realize it's okay. It's
Right.
okay.
Right.
And what I really love about this, and you kind of hit on this too about the outdoors, is bringing that combination of the outdoors, um, with healing
Mm.
and
Oh, it goes so much
understanding.
together. Yeah,
Yeah,
so much together.
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Immersion Intensive. I mean, this episode is brought to us by Immersion Intensives and the great work that you were doing. You guys just had your first workshop, and it's I love the heart and the mission of this company. But tell me a little bit about it and what our listeners can do, and maybe there's some of them that really want to participate too, that really could benefit from what you guys are putting together.
Sure. Jim Phillips, you mentioned him earlier. He's the president of our company. And, we talk about our why. Why are we doing what we're doing? And, he was talking about, life is hard and things around us can feel like it's a mess. And he started looking around and saying, okay, we can look at that and say, look at this. Isn't life a mess? Or we can do something about it. And so he brought this team together and who all are very service oriented. I'm laughing at so many times. I'm like, oh yeah, that is true too. And we wanted to do something that was different and special. I mean, one of the things, because this is my marketing background, I don't want to do more of the same. I always ask the question, yes, but what's different? Yes, but what's different? And what is it we hope to achieve that, can be achieved in a different way? And one of the things that Jim said is he wanted to be able to bring this new model and have fun while we were doing it and
Yeah.
bring joy into people's lives. And so Dr. Julie Eberwein is our VP of Clinical Services, and she has a real gift both through the clinical work, but also with creative expression. She uses art. And so even people who thought that they have zero artistic ability,
Right.
yeah, right, they found, I mean, I'll have to show you at some point in time this beautiful art piece that was just, and it was brought together by this group of women.
Wow.
And
Wow.
there were so, every day, we combine outdoor adventures, so kayaking, horseback riding, paddle boarding, hiking up the side of a mountain, which, by the way, I thought I was going to die, but I did not. And then also the integrative therapy, evidence-based treatment, doing the hard, what you think of as therapy, but then expressive therapy with when words just can't come, finding other ways to get that out. But the other thing that was really beautiful is we had a chef that prepared our meals, and she really understood the intention of what we wanted to do. And so even our food was about feeding our souls. It
Nice.
was beautiful to
Nice.
look at. It was healthy and nutritious, and we all ate like we hadn't eaten in days because it was just so good. And we were, our bodies were just physically spent.
Sure.
One of the women was a dietitian, and she said, that what people didn't realize is that probably the chef did, but that the food that she prepared was all associated with healing and with brain, and
Right.
it was just beautiful.
So this is
And
a total immersion. I mean, you're bringing all the physical, the mental, emotional, the
nutritional.
dietary, nutritional, right? Like everything together. And what are, what's as much as you can within confidentiality and safety, what's some of the things that people got out of it, and that our listeners might, check it out. Where can they find out more?
Yes. I mean, some of the things, and I'm still, we just got back. So,
I
I
know. I
just
know.
returned from this. I returned from an intensive, went and got a new puppy and came home. That goes to show you how I live life.
There you
Um,
go.
but I just some of the things they said, it was life changing. One person told me, talked about to the group that she's had lots of therapy talking about the trauma, but for the first time she understood it wasn't about others, it was about herself.
It's a big
Other,
realization, because
oh,
then you
it
can do
was,
something about it, right?
you can do something about it, right? I mean, these aha moments, I mean, when I would see their eyes like, oh, and coming in and just seeing faces that were just really drawn and heavy, and when they left, so much joy. I mean, that was something Jim said, we want to help put joy back in people's lives. And for me, I don't want to just be selling something. I want us to be able to be giving something.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
I feel like when I mean, even our chef said this. Our chef said, Julie, I didn't realize the impact of what was really happening until I saw people the first day. I interacted with them the first day, and the difference of these four women at the end, it was, I mean, it truly was life changing. And
That's
and
awesome.
it wasn't that there's a secret sauce. I mean, I think the secret sauce is meeting people with where they are, and that flexibility, and not having, a round hole that you're trying to put everybody
Right.
in.
Right.
And I think that is what's unique. We don't have one therapy or one way of managing this. And like Dr. Julie and I both come from different styles, and the two of us, how we work together. And then Garrity was our excursion guide, and he was our male there, that
Yeah.
with all these women. And at first we kind of kept him tucked away, but what we found is it was so beautiful because these women felt safe with him. And And he was there. He was the kind who would allow people to go do things like I'd never paddleboarded before. And quite honestly, I was a little nervous, you know?
Sure,
Oh
sure.
my
Yeah.
gosh, I'm going to wipe out. I did wipe out, by the way, and it was wonderful. The water was just exhilarating, but
Right.
it didn't kill me. I didn't get hurt. And he was there to guide me and help me. And so we participated in that. But I think that was the thing for him. He was there. He became part of the family, so to speak.
Right.
I mean,
So this was 5 days. Is
it
that
was
right?
for 5 days.
5 days. And are all of your immersions? I know that the purpose from talking to Jim, I'm really excited about what he's doing is, this is immersion intensives to help heal things in a quick way, which I mean, therapy is also very, very useful. I'm still active in therapy and have been for many years, but to really give people a jump start to bring joy back. But what can people look forward to? Where can they find out more? And when's your next one's coming up? And are they all going to be focused on trauma in the workplace, or is it other types of trauma or addictions that you're going to be working on?
We're going to be so first I do want to tell you one thing that I think is really important. The word
Sure.
immersion,
Yes.
EMERSION, means coming out of.
Yeah.
And we were very intentional in our name
Yes.
because so many people, yes, we're doing immersive
Yeah. But this
therapies,
is
you
immersion.
know, but we're about bringing people out that when they
Yes.
leave, they're looking at life differently. They're showing up differently. And that's really our goal. So people can visit the website. It's immersionintensives.com. Also, that says how to contact any of us. We're on social media, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, Instagram. We are just in the planning stages for our 2023 intensives. We are planning on having
2024, I assume.
2024. Thank you.
Right,
Yes,
right.
thank you very much. I'm one
No
year
problem.
behind. But yes, for 2024. And although we will probably, we do plan to bring another back about trauma in the workplace because we've had just since that, and these women have come home and talked about it. I'm already getting calls from people saying, when's the next one?
That's
But
awesome.
but we do, really what we want to do is hear from the voice of our customer. We want to hear what people need. So some of the things we've talked about is the grief of families when they've lost loved ones to suicide or to substance use disorder, and especially during the holidays. I mean, that's where we wish we had more time to do this because the holidays brings a lot of that. But what we're doing, I mean, there will be intensives that are specific for men. There will be intensive that are specific for women. And then we may also have some that are for couples.
Right.
At this point in time, it is adults only, but that
Okay.
doesn't mean, I mean, we could also be doing something for college age. Something I really love is that we do small groups.
Right.
So we're
Right.
talking about, 8 to 12 people. This time we did 4 because it was our first one. And we
Right.
really, people are unsure and they wanted to know. And so, but we have some great testimonials that we'll be putting on the
That's
website.
awesome. No, and I think it's so great, the vision that Jim has and that you've come on the team there. And as you said, if you see people lighting up and leaving with joy, that's the whole thing, right? And I'm really excited to see the good that Immersion Intensives is doing for the planet. And I've posted it on my LinkedIn as well, and look forward to being involved and supporting you guys. It's something I believe in very much. I wonder, with your expertise too, and because I have a son that might fit in this category too, if you would do anything on eating disorders or not going
Yes.
forward.
That's something. I actually had a conversation with Jim just today and said, I mean, eating disorders are my heart. It's been my passion my entire life. And so I'm sure we will. I would love to see that come together. I mean, really what our intensives are for people who need more than their individual, but do not need a residential or inpatient level of
Right.
care.
Right.
And so it's like a heavy dose of therapy, 24/7. And we were 24/7,
Yeah.
and so that you can jumpstart,
Yeah.
and so, yes,
And
absolutely.
giving people, I mean, the nutrition, the nature, the beauty, the art, the good rest. I mean, all of those things together. So you're creating a very fertile ground
Yes.
for healing to take place. Right.
That's something else that the women said is how they viewed their bodies.
Mhm.
Because not only, I mean, we truly worked our entire body and
Right.
we saw culinary, we saw our meals as a time. I mean, our society has gotten away from enjoying mealtime. Everyone's so
Yeah.
worried about what they're eating or not eating or
I just saw it today on the news that they said that like people aren't going back to restaurants. Just everything wants drive through and DoorDash, right?
DoorDash.
And
Yep.
drive through and just like even like all the even the fast food ones like no there's fast food restaurants with no seating now.
That it's so funny you said that because one of the people said, I was so glad, one of the participants, I'm so glad that there weren't box lunches.
Oh, right.
And
Right.
we're like, oh no, 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 no. We're
Yeah,
not
no, that's great to have the full experience.
yeah.
So I mean, recently, even though it's inconvenient, I love having people at my home. I love cooking for my friends,
Mhm.
and it's easier to go to a restaurant. I enjoy going to restaurants as well, but there's something very ancient and connecting and community building and healing
Yes.
about preparing food and eating food together and eating healthy food together and making it an event and not just a means.
Yes, it's a
Uh,
celebration. It's a
yeah,
time of connection. And I think you and I, when I talked to you the first time, or we talked about my trip to Italy.
yep.
And I'm a foodie. My daughter's a foodie. I could just be there forever because Italians have one up on us Americans for sure.
From that perspective, absolutely. I would say all of Southern Europe, right? Italian, Spain, France. I love visiting my friends in France. I have a good friend in the south of France. And, like we move the little plastic table with the elegant little tablecloth around to the different tree or outside the house on the different places. And
Yes,
we prepare the meals together and, we have the cheese and the wine before and the meal. And it's just really, it's a beautiful thing, and
it
it's a
is a
great way
beautiful.
to build community. So I love what you guys are doing, and I really support it. And that's why I also wanted to have you on. I mean, to hear your story, which I still want to come back to, but I also really support immersion intensives. We'll put the website up on the show notes as well.
Thank you.
And people feel free to reach out to me as well. I've known Jim for 12 years now. He's a
Mhm.
good man with a heart in a very good place and been a very successful businessman, and now really is focused on giving back.
Yes.
And I'm really excited that he's putting this together. So, and
I,
congratulations on your
oh,
first
thank,
very
thank you.
successful workshop and in immersion intensives.
Right.
And thank you.
Excited.
Yeah. So, coming back to this, I was thinking about like this big transition, which was, and the biggest transitions are always ones that hit us at an identity level, right? So you were in your own mind a C-suite executive.
Mhm.
And then you had this epiphany that you had to let that go. And you acted on it with great courage.
Mhm.
And then you went into a great funk, which is normal in the depression. Like it's a huge shift. How and when did you start to realize that maybe you weren't just a C-suite title person? Like that didn't define you. And then who are you now? Like what is your identity? Like if you come out the other side of that. So how did you deconstruct that? Or how was it deconstructed for you? I don't know which one, right? Is it something that's being done, outside of us or for us, or are we doing ourselves? And then how would you talk about identity now? Because identity is the strongest motivator for action, right? To say I do something like you notice people say I don't smoke. If they quit smoking, I don't smoke, or I quit smoking, or they say I am a smoker.
Mhm.
Right? The
Mhm. Right.
identity is so much stronger. I am a smoker means you just quit, but you're not going to be quit for long because you're
Right.
still saying I don't smoke instead of I am not a smoker, right?
Right.
So you know if you are not a C-suite person, if that's not who you are, then and that shatters, that shook your whole foundation. Maybe it didn't shatter your foundation, but it shook your whole foundation. And then there was, something, that broke down and really to a low point, or not even be able to get on the plane. And then what grew out of that, and what have you become? What have you noticed about your identity? How would you talk about that today? And how would you give, like, if you could take one message from that very dark time, what would that be to people? Would you tell them, well, don't go through the transition, it's too tough? Or what's some things that would make it I don't even want to say, maybe it's less suffering. Sometimes there's a lot of dignity in suffering and a lot of learning that comes out of that. But what would you give advice to somebody else in your shoes? I mean, especially, like, and it's also not accident that it's around 50 years old, plus minus 10, but it's around 50 years old that most people come up against this, but especially women in your case, because there's not as many women in C-suite positions. And then especially ones that get there that are making the decision to step back.
Right.
So what would you say to those going through that? What did you learn about your identity and losing what you thought was your identity, and what have you found? And what would you say to people going through that transition?
Well, I mean, let me be very transparent. I went through it once.
Please.
I went through it twice. I
Yeah.
went through it 3 times because I went through it again in 2023.
Right.
Here, I
Right.
mean, I started 2023, January 2nd, getting a phone call saying our company is restructuring and we're eliminating your position. For the first time, it was very different. Like I had always wanted to blame it on big corporation, all this. This wasn't a big corporation.
Right.
And what I realized was, I'm going to tell you, at first, I don't know what I realized is, okay, here we go again.
Mm, mm,
But what I did is I didn't drop to that low again. And I think why is because I always think of Brene Brown. I can do hard things.
yeah.
Julie, what is the lesson to be learned here?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure where you are about Enneagrams, but I'm an 8 on an Enneagram, and you can call me bossy or you can call me strong or directed,
Right.
whatever. But what I know is I am a fighter and I am resilient. And I think my biggest fear, and it goes back to the mother thing, was not being able to take care of my child.
Mm,
I mean, yes, she is an adult now. She's in college, but my first fear would go to how am I going to take care of my daughter?
right.
Because I am financially responsible for her. She depends on me.
But
And
can I play something back to you, Julie? Because it just hit me right now. So we're talking about identity, right? And you had said before, I am a C-suite. Like this was how I defined myself. This was the God I worshipped, was sort of the words I put to it. And when you shattered that, then you're in this deep depression. And now I just heard you say something very different. I am a fighter and I am resilient. Those are identities as well.
they
But
absolutely
how
are.
much more powerful is that when I am a C-suite title, right?
Right. It
Like,
is so much more powerful. And what I found, I kept holding on to this as of I need this C-suite job in order to have benefits, in order to have this, in order to have that. And one day someone said to me, Julie, you can get insurance, go through a broker.
yep.
I called a broker. He got me insurance for less than I was paying, exact same benefits. I mean, marketplace is a great thing.
Right.
And I
And this is being resilient, right? This
is
is being
being
a fighter, right?
resilient. But I also took some time and made a decision that I wasn't going to allow my anxiety and my fear to make my decisions for me.
Wow. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like,
Yeah.
how did you make that decision? Because that's a huge one for most people. And I was wondering if that came up for you. And I wasn't planting that seed because you said, hey, I just took this decision like that. But then the fear sounds like maybe it came after the fact.
Oh, it does. Well, when it
And
happens again, and you're like, okay, because like keep in
so
mind,
how did you keep those from making the
yeah.
decisions for you? You said I quit letting anxiety and fear make decisions for me. How did you do that? What's something that you could pass along to others that might be facing that fear and anxiety right now?
Because I realized when I had fear and anxiety before, it kept me stuck.
Mm,
Um, there's in dialectical behavioral therapy, the question is, am I being effective?
mm-hmm.
And I realize that I'm not being effective when I'm allowing fear and the unknown and my anxiety. I mean, I'm an anxious person. So, I mean, that's just something I've learned in life to deal with and how to manifest it and how to try to redirect it. But I mean, it can also my anxiety can move me in to perform well and do other things.
Right.
But what I decided is, no, I'm not going to take the first job. I mean, I had a job offered to me almost right out of the bat that was paid well, and I turned it down, and I didn't have another job. And afterwards, I'm like, oh Lord, what have I done? But I talked to my daughter about it, and I said, hey, you know, um, I am at a place in my life, and I said this, that I don't want fear and stress and the unknown to play a role in my decision making, because so far that has not worked well for me.
Right. How's that working for you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I always think about that. How's that working for you, Julie? And I decided that it was okay for me to start my own consulting company, and which I did. And all of a sudden things were just coming out. I found that flexibility worked well in my life. I found that once I opened my mind to other possibilities, that I didn't have to be a C-suite person, because what did that even mean anyway? I realized it opened the door to a lot of things that I had never even imagined before. And
Like, give us an example or two. This is
okay,
interesting.
yeah. So right now, like immersion intensives is
Right.
one,
That you couldn't
you
do that if
know,
you were doing C-suite somewhere else. Yeah.
exactly. I wouldn't have been able to do
And how
that.
was that like on your sort of, as you see yourself now, your identity now that, we've only had two things on it about being a fighter and being resilient. But when you think about the results that you helped create this last weekend at Immersion Intensives, how does that inform your identity? How does that reflect, maybe is a better way to say, your identity of who you are now that you couldn't
You know,
have done if you still had a C-suite job? Like, how are you feeling on, I don't know when you guys finished up, Monday or Tuesday, like the day after the weekend, and you see these, eight eyes, four pairs of eyes
yeah.
shining as they're leaving now.
It you know what the first thought was? This is real. This works. This isn't something I made up. This isn't, if being authentic, being real, being flexible, understanding that it's not always about others, that we have to look at ourselves and take responsibility. Because it would be really easy for me to say, look what those people did to me,
Sure. Yeah.
instead of saying, wow, I was giving a gift. I
Right.
would be able
Right.
to do this. And what I love about what I'm able to do now is I have the flexibility. I work with two eating disorder programs, so I still have the love for that, and I'm
Right.
able to give back there, but I'm doing different things. I'm doing operations. I'm not just doing business development. I found that, you mentioned age earlier, and I wrote down flexibility and age when you were saying that, because I'm in my 60s now. And that's something that, I've never been one who hid my age. I was, I had my baby when I was 40. She's in college. Yeah, do the math. I mean, it's there.
Right. Right.
And I feel like I earned every single year. But all of a sudden, when you're out in the job market, you're like, oh, wait. When people start doing the math, I mean, because they do look at that. I don't
Sure.
care. No
Sure.
HR tells them not to, but they
Of
do.
course they do. Yeah.
And I realized that once I sat back and I let go, let go, let go, let go, and I allowed myself for things to come my way, it came my way in the way it was supposed to at this point in my life.
Mm. Mm.
I have flexibility. I'm able, it was so funny because I came back from immersion intensives and I was tired. And I was thinking, oh, I've got to
Sure.
work. And then I was like, well, Julie, you're kind of your own boss. you know, you can take the day off. And it was like, oh, wait, I can, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and I was able to just kind of, have you ever ridden a horse?
Yep.
So, this was really important to me. I love horses. Horses give me peace. And I have pictures of horses all in my office. And I feel that I walked up and there was this paint that looked like a paint that I used to have, but it was huge. And I saw that they had it tethered up near the front. So I thought it was probably the guy that was going to use it. And I was like, I just love that horse. His name was Henry. And next thing I know, they give me Henry,
Oh,
and I
wow.
ride Henry. But as I sat down, I was so excited. I was sitting up like this. And the guy said to me, sit into the saddle, just sit back and sit into it. And I realized, Julie, that's what it is. Once you allow yourself to let go and just sit into it, and it's a different kind of saddle. It was a different horse than I had ridden on before. It was a different environment because I'm from the
Right.
South and this was the desert. But I was able to enjoy it, and I was able to see it differently. And I was able to allow my body to experience writing in a different way. And even though I had written a lot before, it was really a different experience for me because to be honest, I didn't even notice I was sitting up so tight until the
Mm-hmm.
guy said,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, just let yourself sit
Yeah.
into the saddle."
Yeah.
And I thought, it's so symbolic. And
Yeah.
so when you're asking what I can share with people is that I think we live in a society that has taught us a few things that are it's just crap. You're never enough. You have to do more. You
Mm-hmm.
I remember one day my daughter said to me, "Mama, I don't know what I want to do after college." And I went, "Okay, you'll figure it out."
That's all right. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what
But
20s are for, to figure that
that's
out.
exactly right. And I said, I think that's the thing. Too often we grow up, we're supposed to know what we want to do by the time we're 15.
Well,
Someone,
that's what this podcast is about, life in transition. I said you can either figure it out when you're 20s, or you can be miserable for 25 years and then try to figure it out when you're 50. Right. I mean,
right?
at some point, if you're lucky, at some point in your life, you're going to figure it out. Otherwise, you're going to die unhappy, quite frankly.
Right.
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 And it's okay for it to change too, but it's not going away just
Mhm.
because you pretend that you're going to follow the prescribed career track. Right.
It's so true. Something I've thought of, when I sit back and think about why was I always yearning, yearning, yearning for more, more, more. And I realized in yearning for more, I wasn't appreciating what I had around me at the time. It impacted the kind of mother I was. It impacted the kind of manager I was. I was always so high strung that I couldn't just sit back and
Mhm.
relax and
Like
enjoy.
on the horse, the lesson that you got last
Right.
weekend. So I
Right.
was this week. I had the pleasure of a friend of mine directed a movie documentary about a series of concerts that were going on at Red Rocks outside of Denver. There,
My favorite venue.
I never even have
Favorite
seen
venue.
or heard of it before. I was amazed. But this friend of mine directed this movie, and one of the artists, the title of the song was "Quit Hanging On and Just Be Held."
Wow.
And I thought,
That's
like
it.
that's what you're talking about on the horse. Like, quit hanging on and just be held. Like, relax into it. Like, relax into life. Like, what happens if we actually can dance with life and
Mhm.
experience life instead of try to control it and live it and manage it? And it's really different. How hard do we fight against the current or swim upstream? And if we just let go, we can be carried and enjoy the view as we're going. Right.
My daughter, a song that I've played for her, sang for her, gave to her, quoted for her entire life is "I hope you'll dance."
Yeah. I love that one.
And
Leanne
it's
Womack.
yes. Am I going to sit it out? I hope
Or
you'll
dance.
dance.
I
If
hope you'll
you have the
dance.
chance
Yeah.
to sit it out, and I think that's the thing. So many times we're sitting out. Our fears are causing us to sit out, like paddleboarding. I
Yeah.
could have come up with an excuse and not gone,
Sure.
but I did it, and now I
Right.
love it. I want to do it
Right.
again.
Right.
And the truth is, I did wipe out. I mean, they told us
Sure.
don't listen to the guys on the boat. And a guy came by and said, "How are y'all doing?" And I looked and, well, what do you think happened? Loop.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. I was just writing this chapter in the book about how to connect with God. And dancing is one of those things. Moving your body in a way that you're not thinking about it, right? Is a way that you come into the present. And then when you come into the present is a way to connect with God or your higher self or whatever you want to call it. So I think that's beautiful. And I know you talked about this some before, but there's a couple other items or questions I would like to ask. First of all is, how did this big transition affect your most important relationships? And who would you say are your most important relationships? And how did this transition affect those relationships?
Interesting. I was living in this fantasy that my work was my family.
Oh, wow.
And I still have some of those people. This weird thing happened. I remember as I was leaving, I don't have any tattoos, but I remember having this thought, "Hey, y'all, why don't we all go get a compass tattoo?" And I remember at the time, everybody kind of looked at me strangely, like, "What? Oh, yeah, okay," And
Whatever the crazy lady's saying,
Whatever the crazy lady's saying, we're not getting matching tattoos. And at the time, I remember just thinking, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, they're still going to be in my life. No, they weren't. They weren't in my life.
Yep.
But those people who are true and are my lifetime friends, they, fear does lots of things to people. People become afraid of, what I didn't understand is that people saw me as powerful, and that maybe I could, if they talked to me, it would cause harm. I don't know. Maybe people just didn't like me. I don't know. But I realized that perceptions are really different, and that you have to honor that not everyone sees things the exact same way.
Of
And
course. Yeah.
I had to grieve losing that made up story that my work family was my family.
That's such a beautiful, I can tell you're in therapy the way you talk about that, right? I had to grieve the loss of the made up story that my work family was my family. So, I mean, very well articulated. But if you didn't come to that realization, then you would still be bitter about it. Like,
I would be bitter, and I would wonder, I would either be angry at them, or I'd be doubting myself. And
so
and
it ended, in some ways, it ended your false relationships, I'll say, or not that they're false, but it ended relationships that you had a false interpretation of.
yes, that's it.
And then what about those other key relationships? I mean, you talked some about your daughter, you talked some about your husband, which maybe that fits in the former category. I don't know.
Definitely former. But you know what happened is, once I wasn't working all the time, and some of I want to say some of my work friends, I have reconnected with them later. I mean, it's funny to see those that do come back around, because you do have that real connection.
Yeah, that's right.
And
were you surprised? Let me ask you a question. I'm just thinking about my own experience.
Yeah.
Were you surprised on both sides? Some that didn't come back around, or some that weren't your friends that you thought were, and the other way around, some that were your friends that you maybe didn't think were before? Were you surprised both ways, or one way or the other?
1,000%. 1,000%. I mean, this really weird thing happened yesterday. I sent a text to someone had the same first name as the person that I had worked with. And I sent this text, and all of a sudden I get this text back. It's so good to hear from you. I don't think this was meant for me. It was someone I worked with at Veritas, and she said, I have thought about you so much, and I had to Google to see whose number this was. And I just wanted to tell you, it's so good to hear from you. You're someone who I always admired from afar. And I'm like, wait, what? I didn't even think you liked me. you know? And so, yes, I mean, I do think, I remember at Veritas, the woman who probably disliked me the most when I started there is someone who I've remained friends with. And I mean, she challenged the hell out of me, and I challenged her and told her things she didn't want to hear. And to this day, she's someone I really admire. So 1,000% yes. I think it's helped me to open up my mind and to realize that I really did have this, and I realized, I think it was part of my sickness. Oh, my work family is my family. I mean, that way it made it okay.
It's a very workaholic.
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, I'm in Workaholics Anonymous, right? So I'm workaholic. Yeah. I'm in recovery, and it's a very, sick thing to think that your work friends are your friends and your family.
And that your work friends want to go get a matching tattoo. How crazy is that? I mean, that's just how sick I was. And I look back at it now, and I think, Julie, those people had lives. They had families. They had friends outside of work.
Right.
It was everything to you. It was everything to you. And even though, yes, I would make sure my daughter knew she was loved, I probably didn't make sure that everyone else knew they were loved. Mm-hmm. And I did miss family, my family of origin events. I did miss birthday parties. I mean, one of the saddest things to me, and I've grieved it, I've forgiven myself, but my dad passed away 5 years ago when he was 85. And then my mom passed away unexpectedly this year in July. And I was going through recently some things here. I was looking for a card, And I found all these birthday cards, Mother's Day cards, Father's Day cards that I had bought for them and never sent them.
Oh my.
Never sent them. Life got in the
Oh
way.
my.
And so you know what I'd do? I would hurry and order something online, or I would hurry and do something. And I sat there holding this stack of cards. And you know what it always makes me think of? Remember Harry Chapin, Cats in the Cradle? That song was a very important song to me. And
Mhm.
when I was in high school, my high school boyfriend, he and I used to sit and listen to Harry Chapin all the time. And that was a song that I listened to. And I remember never thinking that would be my life until one day I looked down and I saw my 3-year-old daughter holding something in her hand and talking into it like it was a black, and told me it was her BlackBerry.
You'd be like mama.
And yeah, she grew up just like me. And to be honest, my daughter even now is, I mean, she's president of her sorority. She's, she's a go-getter. And but the thing is, I'll often say to her, but because I remember, one time she said, it's the little things that you remember. She brought something home and said, Mama, I just worked on this. And she was so proud of it. And I go, Anna, that is not your best work. Do you know to this day she remembers it? And I realized I haven't done that just to my daughter. I've done it to other people. And it's not anything, it's just in my mind. I can say, oh, but I want people to be the best they can be. Whereas at the same time, I wasn't being the best I could be because I was so focused on go, go, go,
Mhm.
go, cranking
Mhm.
it out, going.
And there's a time in life when it's appropriate to do that. And there's
Mm-hmm.
a time in life when it's not, right? And at the stage of life that you're in now, you have a lot of wisdom. You've been through a lot. And to share that as an elder, as a sage, to
Mm-hmm.
those that are going is
Yes.
maybe more appropriate for where you are in life than trying to
Yes.
be the one that's going yourself. So in that vein, like if you could share one thing back to the Julie in the boardroom and all the other Julies or Johns in the boardroom in their 40s or 50s that made that decision to make the transition, what one thing would you want to plaster on the billboards to that everyone could learn from your experience when they're in that epiphany moment or in that anxiety moment, whichever one it is?
Mm-hmm. Um, I'm a huge fan of Maya Angelou, and she has a quote that says, "People won't remember what you said or what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel." And
Mm-hmm.
I can take that one step further. People won't remember what C-suite position you had. They won't remember really what you said, or maybe they will, but what they are going to remember is how you made them feel. And so sometimes I encourage people to just slow down enough to see what the energy is we're giving back out there, because we do make a difference. We
Mm-hmm.
can think we're not, but driving down the road, being in I smile a lot, and I can't tell you how often people comment on my smile. And I'm thinking, Julie, you have a gift. You smile, your face lights up. Give that gift away instead of looking scowl, because I can also have a, RBF face. So,
Yeah.
I can have the mom face. So I think that's for me to just think about.
So in every interaction, so whatever it is, but in every interaction, and especially if you're going through a big transition, is to think about how you're coming across to the people around you. Are you making the room a little bit better? Are you I'm going to say honoring? Are you dignifying the people that you're interacting with?
Mhm. I think get out of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
instead of always thinking that I mean, we're always taught, oh, and it is. I mean, believe me, I went through the therapy of, Julie, you've got to stop putting other people first. You got to
Yep.
put
Yep.
yourself first. And so, I mean, please know that what I'm saying though is a way of putting myself first.
Absolutely.
Is
Yeah.
knowing my energy, knowing how I'm
Yeah.
showing up in this
How
world.
you're making other people feel. I have
Um,
this post-it note right here, front and center under the glass on my desk, that says it's not about me. But that's not saying don't take care of myself. It's actually, in fact, saying the opposite.
That's right.
If I had when I was number two of this public auto tech company and the CEO calls me and says, what am I going to tell the market about sales on the conference call in 2 hours? Like for most of my career, he's attacking me. It's about me. I'm doing a sucky job. I got to defend myself. Right. And that brings up all this anxiety and fear. And the fact is, it has nothing to do with me. He just wants to know what to tell the market.
Right. He just wants to know,
And if somebody else was in this seat, he'd be asking them. And so I don't need to get into defending. I don't need to get into posturing. I don't need to get in protecting or trying to look good. Just, hey, this is what you tell the market. That's it. Right.
That's it.
From that sense, it's not about me. I can remember another time where we were reorganizing this company, and there was a lot of senior people and there was one too many. So we were letting him go. And then the next day, my boss is like, you know what? I think we need another pillar. It's too much on this one person. Let's split that business unit in half. Who do we have for that? I said, well, we had this guy we were going to let go. He could probably do it. It'd be a promotion for him, but I think he could probably do it. Okay, let's give it to him. So the next day I'm calling that guy to let him know he's being promoted. And he's all excited because he thinks it's about him. And he doesn't know, and he still doesn't know, right? That the day before he was about to be let go, which also wasn't about him.
Right.
It's just what the business needed, right? So it's actually a way of taking care of ourselves by realizing it's not about us. And then when we can relax like that, then what kind of space can we give to the others in the room? And I think that's what you're saying, to give yourself that space and to give others that space as you're going through the transition.
Sit back in the saddle. Sit back in the saddle and look at what's around you and look at how you're showing up in this world. Because I think something common, have you heard people, and I know I've done this, people look at a picture of themselves and say, that's what I look like. It's like, if we're not posing and people are catching us, it kind of is.
Especially a video. Yeah, that's for sure. So let me ask one more question in this vein. So in the winter in Denver, when you were really down, when you couldn't get on the plane, somebody else that's in that position, there's a lot of people that are, I was reading recently about retirement, and this, I know that wasn't like retirement, but it sort of was. It was a huge transition. Like, retirement has 3 phases from what I heard from most people. First is vacation. Second is depression. And third has 2 possibilities: purpose or death. Right? You either get depressed enough, you don't come out of it, you die. You hear it all the time. People, work their whole life, identify with their work, and then 65 they retire, and 66 are dead, even though they were healthy at work.
Right.
So I think it's normal that everybody goes through that dip. So, but what would you tell somebody in that situation, that if they're in that dark space right now, what would you tell them? That they're, they've gone through a big transition where they're grieving the loss of a big part of what they saw, at least as their identity. What would you tell them to help them to come out of that or to move through it? It's not to fake it or to try to hide from it, but to try to move through that. What advice would you give them?
I think, I'm trying to just say something that truly is what got me out. And I think it's to look, for me, I thought there was a path I was supposed to be on. And when that path got disrupted, I thought my life was over. And to realize that paths are meant to go in different directions. And sometimes if we don't go those directions, we never get to see the views, and you never get to experience things. And just to know it will get better. It will get better. But sometimes you have to just sit in it. But I think you have to tell yourself, okay, I'm going to let you sit in it, but only for this long.
Right.
And then you got to get up and do something different, because, and I think
to accept it as it is, but also then at some point to get up and do something.
Just say, okay, this has happened. It feels like crap.
Yeah, it's awful.
And it's awful, but what can I do so that I have a choice in this? What can I do? I always say we have 4 choices. Anything we do in life, anything. We can, 1, get into substance use, eating disorders, relationship addiction, whatever. We can become suicidal. Those are the 2 unhealthy, but the 2 healthy are physically, what can I do to change this? Okay. Is there something physically I can do? Okay. I can start putting out resumes. I can get up. I can go for a walk. but that may not change it.
Right.
You may not get a job right away. So
Yeah.
then the fourth thing is acceptance. And so you can take this with anything in your life. You have four choices: too unhealthy and too healthy.
So what are the two unhealthy ones again? I sort of missed it. Like
Addiction,
addiction and
and the other is mythology, suicidal.
oh, okay.
If I
Okay.
die, things will be better.
Better.
No,
Right.
they
Okay.
actually won't.
Okay.
And so but getting into that mythological thinking of, if only I could do this, or if only I could do that, if only I was in a relationship, if only I had this C-suite job.
Right.
And but a lot of times people just don't want to feel, they want to numb out, so they
Yeah.
turn to the addictions.
Yep.
But it only works for those two things. They're not long-term
That's right.
solutions.
They only end up in one place, which is death eventually.
Exactly.
Right? For both
That's
of those.
exactly right. Not living life, for sure. And I think, find who your people are. Who are your people, and be with those people.
So be with the people, accept the situation, do what you can do something, do what you can do, focus on your circle of control, and connect with the people that as Arthur Brooks says, your real friends, not your deal friends.
Right.
The ones that are actually care about you and not what they can get from knowing you, or what business deal or transaction they can make.
Right.
Oh, that's good advice.
And realize that for those people that is what they want, it's not about you.
That's right. That's right too. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, anything else that you would like to share today?
I think when people hear the word transition, that brings up a lot of fear to people. And I think we've got to shift the way we look at that word, because I think transition means movement, and movement for all of us is it's a great thing. It's a positive thing. Yeah. And so how do we embrace that? So, that's the last thing I'd like to share.
That's awesome. Yeah. There's a song for everything, right? But every beginning is a new beginnings, and every end is a new beginning. It's like every transition, you have the end, you grieve what's lost, but it's also a new opening.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And that it can allow space. Well, Julie, I'm thrilled that you're here. I really, really appreciate you. I really appreciate how open you're willing to be with our guests, and how people can learn from you because of that willingness to be so open. Mm-hmm. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'm really blown away by your transparency, by your vulnerability, and that's what's makes it useful for people. Not just a good story, but also really useful. And so I really appreciate that. I'm really excited about the work you're doing with immersion intensives.
I am as well. I'm excited. Lots of good things ahead.
Yeah, I really feel happy about that for you. And like I said, we'll put that up on our show notes, and I really appreciate you being on. So
all right. Thank you so much.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.